The stars stretched far and endless, a sea of light in the blackness of space. Among them moved a human vessel named Aurora Dawn. It was not a warship, nor a vessel of conquest. It was a peace mission. Inside it traveled explorers, scientists, and diplomats who hoped to build bridges with civilizations beyond Earth. Daniel, one of the youngest explorers on board, stood by the viewing window. His brown eyes followed the glow of a nearby planet, its surface shimmering with wide forests and silver rivers. This was their destination, the home of a species called the Lumerians. They were tall, wolf-like beings with thick fur that caught the light like moonlit water. Reports said they were distant and quiet, living in harmony with nature but never letting outsiders close. Daniel's heart beat faster as the ship prepared for landing. For years he had studied the stars, dreaming of meeting new life. Now he was here. He whispered to himself, "I hope they accept us." The landing bay of the planet was quiet when Aurora Dawn touched the surface. A group of Lumerians stood waiting. They were taller than humans, their ears high and pointed, their eyes bright with an inner glow. Their fur shimmered between shades of silver and blue as they moved. They stood straight, silent, watching the humans with calm expressions. Daniel followed his team down the ramp. The air was fresh and cool, filled with the scent of green leaves and flowing water. He wanted to look everywhere at once, but his eyes returned again and again to the Lumerians. The leader of the human mission, Ambassador Lee, stepped forward with a smile. He bowed slightly, a gesture of respect. The Lumerian elder, wrapped in a cloak of woven fibers, nodded in return. Their voices soon filled the air with greetings and promises of peace. Daniel stayed behind the main group, watching, listening, and waiting. While the diplomats spoke, his eyes wandered to the side where a smaller figure stood. It was a young female Lumerian, her fur softer, her stance less formal than the others. She seemed curious, her glowing eyes following every move of the humans. For a moment their gazes met. Daniel froze, but she did not look away. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, the way a wolf might when it hears a sound it does not understand. The negotiations lasted for hours. Words of peace were exchanged, gifts were offered, and promises of knowledge were made. Yet Daniel's thoughts kept drifting back to that single Lumerian. When the meeting ended, the groups were guided into the village. The settlement was made, of tall structures woven from living trees, glowing gently with natural light. Bridges stretched between branches, and streams of water ran below, feeding fields of strange glowing plants. The humans were invited to rest and share food. Daniel sat near the edge of the gathering, tasting fruits that sparkled with sweet juice. He kept noticing the same young Lumerian watching him from across the hall. Finally, their paths crossed. She stepped closer, silent as the breeze, until she stood before him. Her presence was tall, her glowing eyes calm, but curious. Daniel felt his breath catch. "Hello," he said softly, unsure if she understood his language. She tilted her head again. Then, with a low sound in her throat, she placed her hand upon her chest. "Lyra." Daniel's lips curved into a smile. "Lyra," he repeated, pointing to her. Then he touched his own chest. "Daniel." Her ears twitched slightly, and he thought he saw the corners of her mouth shift in a faint, unfamiliar expression. The hall grew louder around them, humans, and Lumerians speaking in groups, but Daniel and Lyra stayed apart in their own quiet space. She studied him carefully as if trying to see inside him. He wished he could find the right words to bridge the silence. Instead, he trusted his instincts. Gently, slowly, Daniel raised his hand. Lyra watched with sharp eyes, but she did not step back. With care, he placed his palm lightly on her head between her ears, the way he might comfort a loyal dog back on Earth. The hall grew silent. Humans froze. Lumerians turned in surprise. Daniel realized too late that he might have broken a rule. He began to draw his hand away. But then it happened. Lyra closed her eyes, A low, soft sound escaped her throat. Not a growl, not anger, but something warm. She leaned slightly into his touch, as if the simple gesture had unlocked something, hidden deep inside her. Gasps filled the hall. The other Lumerians stared, wide-eyed. Some whispered to each other in their flowing language. Daniel stood frozen, unsure if he had done something foolish or something wonderful. When he pulled his hand back, Lyra opened her eyes again. They glowed brighter than before. She did not step away. Instead, she remained close, as if a new bond had been formed. Ambassador Lee rushed over, concern in his eyes. "Daniel, what have you done?" he whispered. I just touched her head," Daniel said, still confused. The elder Lumerian stepped forward, his voice deep and steady. "Strange. Never before has one of our kind allowed such closeness with an outsider. The head is sacred. To touch it is to invite trust, or to break it." All eyes turned to Lyra. She stood tall, but when one of her own people reached toward Daniel, she let out a sudden, sharp growl. The hall froze again. It was not anger at Daniel. It was protection of him. Daniel's heart raced. He had done nothing but offer kindness, but now he stood at the center of a mystery. Lyra had chosen him in a way no one understood. That night, the humans were given guest chambers in the village. Daniel could not sleep. He kept replaying the moment in his mind. His hand, her head, the sound she made, the growl that followed. He wondered what it all meant. When he stepped outside to breathe the cool night air, he found her waiting. Lyra stood in the shadows, her glowing eyes calm but watchful. "You're here," Daniel whispered. He did not know if she understood, but he felt the truth anyway. She stayed near him, silent like a guardian. The stars stretched above them, the same stars that had brought him here. And Daniel knew, deep in his heart, that something had begun. Something larger than himself, larger than one mission. It had started with a touch, and it was only the beginning. Morning light filtered gently through the high branches of the Lumerian trees. The air carried the scent of dew and fresh leaves, while soft streams of water whispered through the village below. The humans awoke in their guest chambers, still, unsure what the previous day's events meant. Daniel stepped outside, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. He expected silence, but instead he found her waiting. Lyra stood near the doorway, tall and still, her glowing eyes fixed on him. She had been there all night, it seemed, guarding quietly like a shadow that refused to leave. Daniel blinked in surprise. "You stayed here?" he whispered. Lyra tilted her head, her ears flicking slightly. She did not speak, yet her calm presence told him enough. She had chosen to remain close to him. Throughout the morning, as the humans moved through the village to begin their tasks, Lyra followed Daniel. If he walked to the water's edge, she stood a few steps behind. If he joined a group of humans for discussion, she sat nearby, her gaze fixed on him. The others soon noticed. "Why is she always near you?" one of the scientists whispered, with a mix of curiosity and unease. Daniel only shrugged. "I don't know, I just touched her head yesterday. That's all." The others exchanged uncertain looks. They had all seen how she reacted when someone reached toward Daniel, how her growl had silenced the entire hall. It was not ordinary behavior for a Lumerian. As the day went on, Daniel tried to focus on his duties. The peace mission required observation, study of culture, and respectful sharing of Earth's knowledge. But no matter where he went, he felt her watchful eyes. And strangely, he did not feel burdened. Instead, he felt safer, as if her presence formed a shield between him and the unknown. The first signs of imitation. Later, while humans worked with the Lumerians to study their woven architecture, Daniel sat with a group near a bridge made of living vines. He watched as engineers from both species shared sketches and tools. Lyra, sitting at his side, leaned forward with interest. When Daniel lifted a piece of paper to sketch a simple shape, she tilted her head and took a flat piece of bark. Carefully, she mimicked his movement, scratching lines with the tip of a stone. Her drawing was rough, but it carried intention. Daniel smiled. "You're copying me," he said gently. She looked at him, then down at her drawing, then back again. A soft sound escaped her throat, not unlike the one she had made the first time he touched her head. The humans nearby stared in awe. "She's learning from you," one whispered. "They never do this with us." Word spread quickly. By afternoon, more Lumerians had noticed Lyra's closeness to Daniel. Some watched with curiosity, others with disapproval. It was clear that this bond was unusual, perhaps even troubling to their culture. The protective growl that evening, the humans and Lumerians gathered again to share food. Fruits, roots, and sweet drinks were placed on woven mats beneath the glowing trees. The atmosphere was warmer than before. Laughter and quiet music drifted between groups. Daniel sat cross-legged, enjoying a glowing fruit that tasted like honey. Lyra, as always, sat beside him. He had grown used to her presence, though he still did not fully understand it. A human officer named Patel, noticing Lyra's watchfulness, decided to test the situation. With a friendly smile, he reached a hand toward Daniel's shoulder, meaning no harm, just casual contact. But before his hand could touch, a deep, sharp growl rumbled from Lyra's chest. The sound was low but powerful, silencing the circle around them. Her ears pressed back, her glowing eyes locked onto Patel with fierce warning. Patel froze, pulling his hand away. "I didn't mean—" Daniel raised his hand quickly. "It's okay. She's protecting me." Lyra relaxed slightly but remained close, her fur bristling until the moment passed. The other humans whispered among themselves, while the Lumerians watched in silence. One of their elders muttered softly in their own language, shaking his head. Daniel could feel the weight of every gaze. Daniel's realization. That night, as stars painted the sky, Daniel sat by the water's edge, trying to make sense of it all. He dipped his fingers into the cool stream, watching ripples spread outward. Lyra sat a few feet away, silent, her eyes reflecting starlight. She was always there, watching, waiting, guarding. Finally, Daniel spoke aloud, though his words were soft. "I don't know why you chose me. I don't know what touching your head meant in your culture, but I know you're different. You're loyal." Lyra tilted her head again, the gesture that had become so familiar. Slowly, she crawled a little closer and placed her hand against the ground beside his. Not touching, not crossing the line, but close enough to show her intent. Daniel smiled faintly. "I guess we're friends now." Her glowing eyes softened. No words were needed. The silence between them carried meaning. Growing questions over the next days, their closeness became impossible to ignore. Daniel found that Lyra walked beside him even when he visited the high branches where Lumerian children played. If he examined a glowing plant, she crouched near him, observing his interest. If he sketched, she sketched. If he tasted a fruit, she did the same. The other humans began to whisper about it during their evening reports. "It's not natural," one said. "She's forming an attachment that could change the mission." "Or maybe it's a breakthrough," another argued. "If one of them can bond with us, perhaps it will open doors we've never had before." Even Ambassador Lee took notice. One afternoon, he pulled Daniel aside. "You must be careful," he said in a low voice. "Their culture is private. They may see this bond as disrespect or worse, as a threat." Daniel nodded, but deep inside, he felt something different. He believed Lyra's loyalty was not a threat, but a bridge. The silent warning one day, while Daniel studied the Lumerian weaving methods, another alien approached him. This Lumerian, larger and older than Lyra, leaned forward as if to examine the tool in Daniel's hand. His arm stretched closer, almost brushing Daniel's shoulder. Before he could touch, Lyra stepped between them. Her growl was louder this time, echoing through the chamber. Her ears flattened, her teeth bared, not in attack, but in a clear warning. The elder Lumerian froze, then slowly pulled back. He stared at Lyra, then at Daniel, with an expression that mixed confusion and unease. Without a word, he left. Daniel's heart pounded. He looked at Lyra, who still stood before him like a shield. "You're serious about this, aren't you?" he whispered. She turned her head slightly, her glowing eyes softer now. For the first time, Daniel felt the full weight of her choice. She was not just following him out of curiosity. She had claimed him in a way, placing herself between him and all others. A bond that could not be ignored. By the end of the week, it was clear that Daniel and Lyra's connection had become more than a passing curiosity. She was always there, always guarding, always echoing his movements. The humans wrote long reports, unsure if this was a danger or an opportunity. The Lumerians whispered in their own language, torn between surprise and caution. But for Daniel, it was simpler. He felt less like a stranger in this world because of her. When he walked through the village, he no longer felt small beneath the towering trees. When he spoke, he no longer felt out of place. With Lyra nearby, he felt grounded, safe, and strangely understood. One evening, as the suns of the planet set in golden light, Daniel and Lyra stood on a high bridge of woven branches. The sky burned with color, and the wind carried soft music. From below, Daniel looked at her and said softly, "I think this is only the beginning. Something tells me our worlds will change because of this." Lyra said nothing. She only stood at his side, her glowing eyes fixed on the horizon. But Daniel knew she felt it too. It had started with a single touch. Now it was a bond that neither human nor Lumerian could ignore. The days passed, and what had begun as a quiet curiosity soon became a matter that no one could ignore. Lyra's constant presence beside Daniel was no longer only whispered about. It became the subject of open discussion among both humans and Lumerians. At first, the humans were uncertain but amused. Some joked lightly that Daniel had found a guardian wolf. Others said it was like a fairy tale, where an alien protector had chosen him as her companion. But the longer it went on, the more serious the questions became. Why did Lyra stay with him? What did it mean in her culture? And how would her people respond? The Lumerians themselves seemed even more divided. Some watched Lyra with eyes full of wonder, as if her choice to guard Daniel was a sign of something new and hopeful. Others frowned, their glowing eyes shadowed with suspicion. For them, this bond was unnatural, perhaps even dangerous. The Elders' Council. One bright morning, the humans were invited to stand before the elders of the Lumerian village. The elders were a group of tall, silver-furred figures whose eyes carried centuries of wisdom. They gathered inside a circular hall built of intertwined trees, the light shining softly through branches above. Daniel stood with his human companions, his heart beating fast. Lyra, as always, stood beside him. The eldest Lumerian, a figure named Soral, rose and spoke in a deep voice that carried authority. "We have watched with silence, but silence can no longer guide us. This bond is new, strange, and must be understood." His glowing eyes shifted toward Daniel. "Human, when you placed your hand upon Lyra's head, did you know the weight of that act?" Daniel hesitated. He swallowed hard. "No, Elder. On Earth, a touch like that is simple, a way of showing comfort or care. I did not mean offense." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some Lumerians tilted their heads in thought. Others narrowed their eyes. Soral continued, "Among us, the head is sacred. It is not touched except by those bound in trust or in deep family. Lyra accepted your touch. More than that, she guards you fiercely. This has no record in our history." Lyra growled softly at the attention, stepping closer to Daniel as if to shield him even here, in the council chamber. The sound echoed through the hall and the murmurs grew louder. One of the younger elders frowned. "This is dangerous. If one outsider can claim such loyalty, what will become of our ways?" But another elder, her voice calm and soft, raised a hand. "Or perhaps it is not danger, but change. Perhaps this human carries a gift his people do not yet see." Uneasy humans. After the council, the humans returned to their quarters. The air between them was heavy with debate. "This could ruin everything," one of the officers muttered. "If they see Daniel as breaking a law, the peace mission could fail." Another shook his head. "Or it could be the key. They've never shared so much with us before. Maybe this bond shows them a new way." Ambassador Lee sighed deeply. He looked at Daniel with concern. "You must understand, Daniel, that everything you do now matters more than before. Your friendship with Lyra could either open doors or close them forever. Be careful." Daniel nodded, but deep inside he felt torn. He had not chosen this path on purpose. He had only acted with kindness, and yet Lyra's loyalty had become stronger each day, as if she had decided that nothing could separate them. Lyra's choice that evening, while the humans prepared their reports, Daniel sat outside under the glow of the Lumerian trees. Lyra sat near him, silent as always, her eyes watching the movement of shadows. Daniel turned toward her. "They don't understand you. They don't understand us." His voice was quiet, almost a whisper. "I didn't mean to cause trouble. I just wanted to be kind." Lyra tilted her head, ears twitching. Slowly she reached out and placed her hand on his arm. Not rough, not demanding, but gentle. Her glowing eyes met his, steady and calm. Daniel felt a warmth spread through him. It was not fear, not confusion, but something deeper. Trust. She was choosing him again, even after all the questions and doubts. The Festival of Lights. Soon after, the Lumerians invited the humans to witness a festival. Once a year, the village gathered to honor the twin moons that circled their world. Lanterns made of glowing vines floated into the sky, filling the air with light. Music and soft chanting echoed among the trees. The humans stood in awe, watching the beauty unfold. Daniel stood among them, but once again Lyra was at his side. She walked with him through the crowd, her gaze sharp and protective. When a group of young Lumerians, curious and bold, reached out toward Daniel in greeting, Lyra growled again, her voice low but firm. The young ones backed away quickly, eyes wide. The music faltered for a moment, and once again whispers spread. "Why does she guard him so?" some said. "This is unnatural," others replied. "But look, she is loyal," a few murmured, their tones thoughtful. The festival continued, but Daniel felt the weight of every stare. What had begun as curiosity was now a storm of judgment. The humans' words, the next day, the council called them again. This time both humans and Lumerians filled the chamber. The tension was thick in the air. Elder Sorrel spoke. "We cannot ignore this any longer. Human Daniel, speak. Why does Lyra choose you? What do you offer that even our own do not?" Daniel's heart pounded. He looked around at the many glowing eyes upon him. He took a deep breath. "On Earth," he began slowly, "we show care with small things. A hand on the shoulder, a smile, a touch on the head. To us, it is normal. It means friendship, kindness, trust. When I touched Lyra's head, I did not know it was sacred, but I did know I wanted her to feel welcome." He glanced at Lyra, who stood firmly by his side, her presence calm yet strong. "I did nothing special. I only gave what is natural for humans, kindness. But she chose to accept it, and she chose to stay." The chamber fell silent. His words were simple, but they carried truth. The elders looked at one another. Some frowned. Some nodded slowly. The humans held their breath. Then, to everyone's surprise, Lyra stepped forward. She stood in the center of the hall, her glowing eyes sweeping across the crowd, and when another elder moved as if to step closer to Daniel, she growled once more, loud and clear, her voice filling the chamber. It was not anger. It was a declaration. She was choosing her place, and it was beside the human. The turning point. The silence stretched long after her growl faded. Then the soft-voiced elder spoke again. "Perhaps we have judged too quickly. If one human can earn loyalty with simple kindness, what else might their people share with us?" Murmurs rose again, but this time they carried less suspicion and more thought. Soral lifted his hand for silence. His glowing eyes studied Daniel, then Lyra. At last, he said, "This bond is strange. But perhaps strange things are needed in times of change. We will watch, we will learn, and we will decide in time." The council ended, but the air had shifted. Where before there had only been fear, now there was curiosity. A quiet promise. That night, Daniel and Lyra sat again by the stream. The moons reflected on the water, glowing like silver mirrors. Daniel let out a slow breath. "I don't know what will happen next, but I promise you this. I'll stand by you, the same way you stand by me." Lyra tilted her head, then leaned, slightly closer, her glowing eyes calm and steady. In that moment, Daniel understood. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever doubts others held, their bond was real, and it was only growing stronger. The days following the council were uneasy. Though no decision had been made, the entire village felt the weight of Lyra's choice. Everywhere Daniel walked, he could feel the eyes of both humans and Lumerians following him. Some looked at him with curiosity, others with concern, and a few with suspicion. Lyra never left his side. She walked beside him in the morning when the humans studied plants. She sat near him during meals. She stood guard at night when the humans rested. Daniel had grown used to her presence, but he knew every action now carried meaning. The elders were watching. His own people were watching, and so when trouble arrived, it felt almost inevitable. The misunderstanding, it began during a shared lesson. The humans were teaching the Lumerians about simple machines, wheels, pulleys, and levers, while the Lumerians showed the humans how they wove living trees into strong bridges. Daniel was explaining how a lever could lift something heavy with little effort. He placed a log across a stone and pressed one end down, showing how the other end rose. A group of young Lumerians leaned in with interest, their glowing eyes wide. But one of the older Lumerians, a male with dark fur and sharp eyes, stepped forward. He spoke quickly in his language, his voice edged with distrust. The humans did not understand, but they felt the tension. Ambassador Lee frowned. "What did he say?" A Lumerian translator replied softly. "He fears your tools. He says you wish to use them to control us." The air grew heavy. Daniel raised his hands. "No, that's not true. These are for helping, for building, not for harm." But the older Lumerian did not seem convinced. He stepped closer to Daniel, his voice rising, his hand pointing sharply at him. In an instant, Lyra stepped between them. A deep growl rumbled from her chest, louder than before, echoing off the woven walls. The young Lumerians gasped. The humans froze. The elder stopped, his glowing eyes wide with shock. For a moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, he stepped back. But the damage was done. Murmurs swept through the crowd. Some Lumerians whispered that Daniel was dangerous, that he had turned one of their own against her people. Others argued that Lyra's loyalty was proof of something deeper. The elders called for another council. The call to answer inside the great hall, the atmosphere was tense. The humans stood together, silent, while the Lumerian elders formed a circle around them. Villagers gathered outside, waiting for the decision. Elder Soral rose. His deep voice carried through the chamber. "This cannot continue without answer. One of our own stood against her people for a human. This has not happened in our history. We must decide if this bond brings danger or hope." He turned to Daniel. "You will speak, but this time, not with words alone. We will test your truth. We will see if the bond is real or if it is trickery." Daniel's mouth went dry. "A test?" "Yes," Soral said. "The trial of trust. If you pass, we will allow this bond to remain. If you fail, the bond must end." The humans murmured nervously. Ambassador Lee stepped forward. "Elder, what does this trial mean?" Soral's eyes glowed with steady light. "It means the human must show trust in Lyra, and Lyra must show trust in him. Only then will we believe." Daniel glanced at Lyra, who stood tall and calm beside him. Her glowing eyes met his. In that silent gaze he felt reassurance. The trial begins. The trial was set at the heart of the village, beneath the great trees that stretched toward the sky. The entire settlement gathered to watch. The test was simple in words, but heavy in meaning. Daniel would stand blindfolded in the center of the circle. Around him, obstacles would be placed. Stones, logs, paths that twisted in strange ways. He would not see them. He would not know where to go. Only Lyra would guide him. Not with hands, not with force, but with sound and presence. If he trusted her fully, and if she guided him with care, they would reach the end together. Daniel stood in the center, his eyes covered with a soft cloth. The world went dark. His heart raced. He could hear the whispers of the crowd, the crackle of leaves underfoot, the rush of wind through branches. Then he heard it, a low, steady sound. Lyra's voice. Not a growl, not a threat, but a gentle rumble calling him forward. He took a step. The ground was uneven, but her sound grew softer when he turned the right way. When he stumbled near a stone, her voice grew sharper, warning him to stop. Slowly, carefully, he moved through the unseen path, guided only by her. The crowd watched in silence. Each step he took was a measure of faith. Each sound she gave was proof of her care. Minutes passed. Daniel's clothes brushed against vines. His foot struck against a log, but before he could trip, Lyra growled gently and he corrected his path. Sweat gathered on his forehead, but he trusted. He kept walking. At last, the ground beneath him leveled. The whispers of the crowd grew louder. He pulled away the blindfold, and there she was, standing at the end of the path, waiting. He had reached her. The declaration. The crowd stirred. Some gasped, some murmured with disbelief. Others nodded slowly. Elder Soral rose from his seat. His deep voice carried over the gathering. The trial is past. The human trusted and the Lumerian guided. Their bond is no trick. It is real. A wave of sound filled the air. Some cheers, some protests, many whispers. The humans exchanged relieved glances. Ambassador Lee sighed with visible relief. Daniel's heart felt light. He looked at Lyra, who stood calmly beside him, her eyes glowing with quiet strength. For a moment it seemed as though the world itself had grown brighter, but not all were convinced. The elder who had argued before, the one with sharp eyes, stepped forward. This trial proves only trust between two. It does not prove safety for all. What if this bond grows too strong? What if it divides us? The council grew restless again. Yet Soral raised his hand for silence. Perhaps. But every change begins with one step. Today we have seen trust. Tomorrow perhaps we will see unity, a night of reflection. That night the humans gathered in their chambers, still processing what had happened. Some were excited, believing the trial had secured a future of peace. Others remained uneasy, fearing that the bond between Daniel and Lyra might still spark conflict. Daniel sat outside watching the twin moons rise. Lyra sat beside him, quiet as always. He turned to her and spoke softly. I trusted you completely, and you guided me. Thank you. Lyra tilted her head slightly, her glowing eyes steady. She made a low sound in her throat, softer than a growl, more like a purr of calm. Daniel smiled faintly. I think they're beginning to see. Maybe this will change more than just us. He leaned back, watching the stars. Lyra remained at his side, a silent guardian, a living promise. The shadow ahead. Though the trial had been passed, not all hearts were at peace. In the shadows of the village, some Lumerians whispered their doubts. Change was frightening. Trust was not easy. And Daniel could feel it too. The trial was not the end. It was only another step on a path filled with questions. But as long as Lyra stood by him, he felt ready. Together they had faced the test. Together they would face whatever came next. It had started with a single touch. It had grown into trust. And now, it was becoming the bridge between two worlds. The morning sun rose over the Lumerian village, casting long golden shadows across the woven bridges and glowing plants. Birds with silver feathers sang softly from the treetops, and the air carried the scent of damp earth and fresh leaves. Daniel woke early as he had done every day since arriving and stepped outside. Lyra was already waiting, standing tall and alert beside the stream. Her glowing eyes reflected the sunlight, calm and watchful. Daniel smiled, feeling a sense of quiet peace. The trial had ended. The elders had accepted their bond. The whispers of doubt still lingered in some corners of the village, but the majority now watched with curiosity, admiration, and cautious hope. Daniel knew this was only the beginning. The first steps of change. The peace mission resumed its work with renewed energy. Humans and Lumerians collaborated on projects together. They built bridges, cultivated glowing plants, and exchanged knowledge of tools and culture. The partnership was slow at first, each side careful not to overstep. But with Daniel and Lyra showing the possibilities of trust and loyalty, the walls of hesitation began to crumble. Lyra never left Daniel's side. Wherever he went, she went too, not as a burden, but as a symbol. Her presence inspired the Lumerians who had once doubted, and it comforted the humans who sometimes felt out of place in this foreign world. Children began to follow the pair from a distance, fascinated by the bond they had seen. Young Lumerians mimicked the way Daniel and Lyra moved together, learning lessons of trust without needing words. Even the skeptical elders softened. They watched as the two species began to cooperate in small ways that had once seemed impossible. A symbol of unity. One afternoon, Ambassador Lee invited Daniel and Lyra to the village square. He spoke to the gathered crowd, both humans and Lumerians, about the importance of friendship and trust between their peoples. Daniel stood beside Lyra, feeling her calm presence. The villagers watched in silence, and then the ambassador continued. Today we have witnessed something remarkable. One human and one Lumerian have shown us that kindness, trust, and loyalty can bridge even the greatest differences. This bond is more than a friendship. It is a symbol of what our worlds can achieve together. The crowd erupted in murmurs of approval. Some humans clapped quietly, while many Lumerians nodded, their glowing eyes reflecting newfound respect. Even the skeptics had to admit that the pair's loyalty to each other had created something special. Lyra growled softly, a gentle sound meant not for warning, but as if acknowledging the words. Daniel smiled at her. She had taught him a lesson that no classroom or book could, that the strength of trust could move hearts and change minds. The unexpected visitor. Just as Daniel and Lyra began to relax, a new group approached the village. Travelers from a distant Lumerian settlement had come to observe the humans. They were tall, serious, and cautious. Their arrival caused a stir. The elders called a meeting. The visitors were curious about Daniel and Lyra's bond. They had heard rumors of a human who had earned the trust of a Lumerian, and they wanted to see if it was true. The two groups gathered in the central hall. The visitors watched closely as Daniel and Lyra entered. Lyra, as always, remained at Daniel's side, her glowing eyes steady. One of the visitors, a tall Lumerian with dark fur, stepped forward. "Is this true?" he asked. "Has one of our kind truly chosen to follow a human? And has the human earned loyalty without force or command?" Daniel looked at him calmly. "Yes," he said. "It began with a simple act of kindness. I touched her head to show trust and friendship, and she chose to stay with me, to guide me, and to protect me. That bond has proven itself through trust, not power." The visitors were silent, watching Lyra carefully. She stepped forward, growled softly, and stood beside Daniel. Her presence alone answered the question. After a long moment, the visitors nodded slowly. "We see it is true," one said. "Perhaps there is more for our people to learn from humans than we realized." The first exchange, inspired by the visitors' approval, the elders invited Daniel and the humans to teach small lessons about Earth. They showed how humans built tools, cultivated plants, and shared knowledge through words and gestures. In return, the Lumerians taught the humans about weaving trees, balancing energy from streams, and moving without disturbing the life around them. Everywhere Daniel went, Lyra was there. When he demonstrated a simple pulley, she crouched beside him, her eyes following his hands. When he showed how to balance a small structure, she leaned forward in interest, sometimes touching the objects gently, her guidance subtle yet firm. The villagers noticed that learning was faster and easier when Daniel and Lyra worked together. Their cooperation became a living example, a demonstration that different species could work together without fear. Trust that spreads weeks passed, and the bond between Daniel and Lyra became stronger. But it was not just their bond that grew. Slowly, trust spread among the villagers. Humans no longer felt like strangers in a strange land. Lumerians began to accept small gestures of care, a hand on a shoulder, a gentle touch, a smile. Even the young and skeptical Lumerians began to approach the humans more freely, asking questions and helping with tasks. Daniel noticed how much easier it had become to work alongside them, all because Lyra had chosen to stand by him. Lyra's loyalty also taught the humans a lesson. They realized that trust was not simply given, it had to be earned, nurtured, and protected. And when it was mutual, it could create something larger than either species alone. The Festival of Unity, to celebrate the growing understanding between humans and Lumerians, the elders organized a festival of unity. Lanterns made of woven glowing, vines floated into the sky. Music from strange instruments drifted through the village. Every human and Lumerian was invited. Daniel and Lyra led the procession side by side. Children ran ahead, laughing and playing, while elders and villagers followed more slowly, watching and learning. The festival was filled with color, light, and the soft hum of joy that came from seeing two worlds connect. At the heart of the celebration, Daniel spoke to the crowd. "This festival is not just about light or music," he said. "It is about friendship, trust, and the choices we make. Lyra and I began with a simple act of care, but look at what it has created. This is only the beginning." Lyra growled softly, a sound of agreement. The villagers laughed softly and nodded. The humans clapped. For the first time, it felt as if humans and Lumerians were no longer strangers, but partners. A future together as the festival continued into the night. Daniel and Lyra stood on a high bridge, watching the lanterns drift into the sky. The twin moons reflected on the streams below, casting silver paths of light across the village. Daniel looked at Lyra. "We've come a long way," he said. "I never thought a single touch could start something like this." Lyra tilted her head, ears flicking, and let out a soft rumble. It was her way of saying, "Yes, we did it together." Daniel knew she was right. Their journey had started with trust, strengthened by loyalty, and now it had become a bridge between worlds. He also knew challenges would come. Not everyone would accept humans immediately. Not all bonds could be as simple or strong. But Daniel felt ready. Together they had shown what was possible. As he watched the lanterns drift upward, Daniel felt hope. This world, once distant and unknown, had opened its heart to humanity, and Lyra, his friend and guardian, had made it possible. He whispered softly, "We did it, Lyra. Together we did it." Her eyes glowed brightly, steady and warm. She stepped closer, brushing against his arm in the quiet language of trust. It had begun with a single touch. It had grown into a bond of trust. And now, it had created a future where two species could walk together, learn together, and grow together. Daniel smiled, knowing that this was only the beginning of a new path, a path of friendship, understanding, and hope that would last for generations.